So welcome everyone. Hi Purna, how you doing?
Good.
Good. So this is, my name's Ratnavyuha. I'm in Auckland, New Zealand, and this is my friend Purna. He's at Waiheke Island, which is an island on the outskirts of Auckland. You have to take the ferry to get there.
Well, that's when the ferries were running.
That's right. That's when the ferries were running. So we've decided to do a, when did the ferries stop, Purna?
I think they've got them for emergency use for essential workers.
Yep. So we've decided to do a podcast, and we're going to experiment with audio and video. But the reason I asked Purna to talk was that Purna has been studying the Tibetan Book of the Dead for a long time. And the period of time that we're going into is probably got some similarities to the Buddhist notion of bardo. So maybe I'll pass it on to Purna to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, a little bit of personal context. I came off retreat 2 weeks ago to a planned future, and that was all completely thrown in the air. Of course, we were in moving towards lockdown. You know, there's the cliche I've heard so many times over the last 2 weeks, we're in unprecedented times. I basically came out of retreat to a world in upheaval. I think one of the worst aspects of it is I couldn't plan my future anymore. I didn't know what I could move around. On one level, it was the comfortable idea, oh, we're Buddhists, we can move into retreat now. Actually, it's not even been as tidy as that. I think the worst thing is the questioning of the disruption to my personal identity, my placement in a wider context, social, immediate friendships. It's all changed. Nothing has been able to be taken for granted. And the upheaval, the disruption is classic bardo material, as you suggested. Bardo is an old Tibetan term, means between two. Okay, you've probably heard of the Tibetan Book of the Dead or variants of it in some way, and we'll go into that in a minute, but the essence of what we're dealing with is the disruption to identity. We're between two fixed identities, and it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to take stock. It's an opportunity to look at what is actually the world I live in. It wasn't the stable, smooth flowing process that I'd taken for granted. And that is an enormous opportunity. Well, I want to go into the Tibetan Book of the Dead. I first met this when I was at university. I was interested in Buddhism, and a friend at the university bookshop, this is in Victoria and Wellington, thrust into my hands a copy of, he said, this book's just come in. And I looked at it, and it was the Tibetan Book of the Dead, translated by Evans Wentz in the new paperback edition with commentary by Jung, etc. And it was a really strange experience because without even looking at it, without even going into it, I felt I was holding some form of holy book. I'm not saying that lightly. I've never responded to the Bible or the Quran or the Torah in quite the same way. I felt this was a special book. I, of course, immediately brought it and could not make head or tail of it. It was completely incomprehensible. I tried to go into it, and it's taken me years to try and fathom what it is I'm dealing with here. And I thought it was an exciting book about, of course, it'd be really handy to know what happens in the after-death state. I think that is of relevance. And, you know, Padmasambhava, or whoever this guy that wrote the thing, he didn't write it actually, he was recorded as having taught it. He seemed to know what he's talking about with what happens after we die. But actually, it's a book for the living. It's a book for opportunities. It's a book for identifying gaps in our identity. And we are living right through the middle of one of them, a bardo.
So when you say that it's an opportunity to, you talked about gaps in our identity. What did you mean by that?
Who I thought I was has been thrown upside down. And we all get this huge disruption. You know, a relationship breaks up, we lose a job. Our world, our identity has been thrown. And it's an opportunity to look at the raw material of our existence. Who are we? What is really going on? It's an as I keep stressing, it's an opportunity.
So
that's what the bardo, yeah.
Go ahead, finish, please.
That's what the bardo represents, an opportunity to reconnect in a wider context, I think is the best way to put it.
Because normally when people's identity and their plans get shaken up and changed, they experience disappointment.
Yes.
So what's the how are we to see this change? How are we to kind of move away from disappointment to seeing it as opportunity? Isn't it just optimistic thinking?
It is optimistic thinking, and it's the essence of mindfulness, pain management, you name it. That we look at what's happening, we look at our mental states, but broaden the context that they're taking place in. And that wider context, or being able to move our awareness into a greater context, is the opportunity. It's not a denial. It's not optimistic thinking in terms of pretending the fear's not there or pretending the uncertainty's not there. The uncertainty and the fear need to be looked at. But within that is the possibility of a broader context.
Yeah. I just remember kind of from other things, like this idea of a broader context. I remember a story that Vidyamala, who's a member of our order, also spoke about when she was having a very difficult time with in the hospital, and she was just experiencing just the enormity of the change that she was caught in. And I don't remember the story completely, but she basically had become a paraplegic, I believe, and was kind of experiencing intense pain. And she tried to find something besides that, but the intense pain was the whole of her experience, or it felt like that. And she kind of found a crack in that. She found the feeling of the sheets on her legs and how pleasant that was. And that gave her a way into a different angle on the experience. It didn't remove the experience, the difficult experience of pain she was feeling, but she had something else in addition to that. Is that what you're talking about, or is it different?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. The classic story from a Buddhist perspective is, of course, the 4 sights. So the first 3 sights are disease, old age, and death. And the Buddha looking at them and understanding this was the raw material of his experience. This was the raw material of human existence. He didn't flinch from it. He looked at it, understood it, that this wasn't just him, it was everybody went through this. We're all going through the possibility of it in a more collective sense, but it doesn't alter. This is the basic facts of existence. But within that context, he had an encounter with somebody who'd gone forth in search of a more ultimate truth. And that sparked something in the Buddha, the possibility that there was something deeper happening, that human consciousness wasn't even necessarily particularly his personally, that there was a more ultimate level to it. Right from the early Pali scriptures, we get the refrain, "This mind, O monks, is luminous." It's covered over with the stuff of our existence. So the Tibetan Book of the Dead is very much based around this, that we focus more deeply. That may involve opening to the pain, but it's opening to it in the context of the bigger question of who we are. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead teachings, that's based around what they refer to as the innate luminosity, the bardo of the moment of death, when we've lost our anchors, we've lost our stable reference points, and we're just floating. And the key point of the Book of the Dead is staying with that possibility of luminosity. We won't handle it for very long, but that's okay. But it's just even opening ourselves to the possibility of it, that the deeper level is actually extremely rich.
Mm. It's great that you pulled in the story of the four sights from which also raises the point that the Buddha, in a way, spiritually never saw those things before. He was surprised when he was surprised when he ran across old age and realized spiritually on a deeper level that he too would experience old age, that he too was subject to illness, that he too is subject to death, because there was a certain narrowness in his view before that, wasn't there?
Yes.
That those things somehow didn't happen to him.
He, according to one tradition, he dialogued with his charioteer, Chanda, is this the fate of just this person, or is it the fate of all of us? And of course, Chanda comes back each time and says, this is the fate of all of us. He doesn't flinch from exposing the Siddhartha to the full impact of what he's looking at.
So that's kind of a bit of your broadening is informed by that story, because prior to the Buddha's broadening, the Buddha just saw life kind of from his own perspective. He kind of thought that his experience was the whole of experience. He felt that certain things wouldn't happen to him, certain things couldn't happen to him. But after that experience of the four sights, he realized that he, like everybody else, was in the same predicament. But within that predicament, there's this golden thread of the possibility of a spiritual life, which is the broader context you're speaking of.
Exactly. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is loosely based around well, not more than loosely, it is structured around a sequence of 3 bardos. They actually recognize 6 bardos. They're all gaps between identities. But the critical ones are the moment of death, the bardo of what they call reality, and the bardo of rebirth. And they are, in a sense, what Buddhism calls the Trikaya, or 3 dimensions of reality, of Buddhahood. And we're bouncing down from the possibilities get more and more constrained as we move towards rebirth, which is us moving towards normalizing the situation we're in, establishing an identity, and becoming a little bit more rigid with it, a little less open to the possibility. So there's this primary luminosity of the moment of death. This is the most fearful point, but within that fear is the great luminosity, the moment of death. Then within that, we descend in a sense into a chaos of more dreamlike imagery. And traditionally, we need a friend, a spiritual friend, a guru, however we frame it, to remind us there's an opportunity in there. Don't get lost. Stay with what is happening. You're not just looking at chaos, you're looking at a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. And it's assuming we have prior exposure to these imaginal forms. But there's an aspect to all Mahayana sutras, which includes the Tibetan Book of the Dead. You're never quite sure how much are they describing what actually happens, or how much are they trying to induce. We're very suggestive, particularly in the dying state.
Well,
sorry.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was thinking of when you were just talking, because you were talking about the importance of a friend or a guru, and you were also speaking earlier of the difficulty of understanding this text. And I was just reminded of the retreat theme we were just on. You know, we were just on 2 weeks of retreat on the spiritual friendship. And, you know, Gampopa, who was a student of Milarepa's, spoke about how in the early days of your spiritual career, you won't meet the Buddha, you won't meet the Bodhisattvas, you won't meet higher spiritual friends. But in the early days, the most important friends in your life will be ordinary human beings. And I kind of wonder if that's not the case for many people right now, that the real important people are the people right around them, you know, and people who can help them or can offer to them that broader perspective.
So I think the spiritual friendship, and what one of the aspects the Bardo Tadol represents is the importance of, at the moment of supreme crisis, we can both give and we both need connection. We need to be able to hear or be receptive to somebody pointing out a wider context.
Sorry for my guest.
That's a beautiful black cat.
Yep, she wants in on the picture, I think.
The connection is the thing and it's the connection that's providing an awareness. Broaden your context, broaden what you're looking at. It's not denying it. It's somebody that can be there with you through the fear, even a passage into death. This is what we can offer people who are dying. Just allow them to explore their hopes, their fears, to be there with them.
Yep, sorry. She was gonna, oh. This is what they warn you about in all the production tips, like kind of put the cat outside. So I was thinking about that, Purna, because you know, the Buddha talks a lot about friendship and the importance of people. And with respect to fear, and you know, it's not like you were saying earlier, you don't want to deny what's going on. You don't want to try and pretend it's not going on. But at the same time, to have people or have something that's totally just bringing your attention back on the problem, back on the difficulty, and being obsessed with it in a way that isn't knowing it, but is sort of like being overwhelmed by it. That's what a lot of people are complaining about right now, is that they just are glued to the TV, watching the situation. They're obsessed with what could happen. They're fearful, they're anxious. But I guess this friend we're talking about doesn't deny any of the problems, doesn't deny the situation, but broadens it out and sees other things in addition to that, don't they?
Yeah. So it's not becoming obsessive in the wrong sort of way. It's opening to with a light touch, because we're also opening to the possibility of there being deeper levels to what's happening, of there being high levels, however you want to frame it. Whether we even want to frame it as just, okay, there are other dimensions to existence, or there are the possibilities of connection even with other beings. That might be a bit woo-woo for many people, but it's making connection in a wider way.
Well, and even with other beings, the things that I notice are that when I slow down, I make connection with life. You know,
Exactly.
I wake up to life around me, insects, birds, animals. So
Great.
when you slow down, other things happen, don't they?
Yeah. And I guess the essence is that slowing down and opening to
Mm.
a wider, life is happening. We've got an opportunity for, the planes are stopped. The nature's revitalizing in a way that will hopefully make us really question, we've got an opportunity here in terms of we don't need to go back to the old way of existence.
Mm. I was also wondering, a lot of people have, we've been holding afternoon, what would you call them, like check-in sessions, Dharma study sort of stuff, every 2:00. And some of the people have been talking about the difficulty they're having with the, other people kind of hoarding and kind of being aggressive and stuff, not being friendly. And I was thinking, oh, that's interesting. One of my friends told me, one of our friends was talking last night and just talked about how long the lines are at supermarkets to get in. And so there's probably a lot of tension around those events. So I guess, this teaching also applies for those moments, doesn't it? Because in those moments, we have a choice, don't we, of how we respond to that moment or what we do. Mm. So what do these teachings tell us to do in those moments?
Well, we may have to imagine a friend whispering in our ears. It's not the whole picture. Let it go. Open to wider possibilities. There is a friend in that queue. They're not all going to be aggressive. Actually, to be a friend, we have to open to friendship, we have to start being friendly.
Very good point.
So, it's looking at the chaos of the bardo, if you like, the chaos of that queue. And the friend would be reminding us, in the traditional sense, there's a bodhisattva in there. Mm. Look for them. Mm. Find the bodhisattva in the crowd.
And so we're looking for the bodhisattva, the friend, that dimension of a broader reality in that crowd. What do you do at home when you're at home? I mean, many people are at home by themselves or with a couple people. How's the same teaching translate to that situation?
But even if we can just still ourselves somewhat, become more aware of the physical context we're in, the emotional state we're in, but that awareness is of itself broadening a context, because on top of the emotional state we're in, we've got the awareness that we're trying to be aware of it. That is part of the trick. Mm.
So to just practice, like the 3-minute breathing space, or a body awareness, or an awareness of senses, or the mindfulness of breathing, or the metta bhavana, all those meditation practices open us up to a wider dimension, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Feel our feet on the floor, our bottom on the chair or the cushion. Just connect with something more than our immediate state.
William Stafford's got a really great line in one of his poems. I think the poem's called "You Reading This, Be Ready." And and he's kind of basically, you know, kind of encouraging us to be open to this moment right now, this moment right here, you know, what could happen, you know, be ready, you know, don't look for it in a different moment. Don't look for everything to be perfect. It's right here. It's always right here. I always love that poem. Yeah.
Lovely.
So we need to wrap up, I think. Do you have any closing kind of ribbons to tie on this whole?
What the fourth sight represented to the Buddha was both the possibility of something higher, but also the importance of the quest for the human condition. One of the unique features of what we're in is we're going to go through a roller coaster of emotions. But if we can keep a thread of connection we're on a journey. That journey means we deal with the difficulties as they arise, we deal with the pleasures as they arise, whatever, but we keep that thread of connection with we're looking for the possibility, we're seeking something beyond. In the traditional terms of the fourth sight, it's the paramartha, the ultimate goal.
Mm. Yeah, that's
Deeper level of in the Tibetan Book of the Dead terms, it's the interior luminosity.
Mm. And that's a really important kind of component of Buddhism, is that I guess it's the innate knowledge, or the kind of the feeling. It's a felt sense that there's something more,
Exactly.
that what you've got around you, what you see, is not everything. You know, you kind of know there's a veil somewhere that could be kind of pulled aside, but you're not quite sure where it is, or how to reach it, or how to pull it aside. But many of us have had that experience of there being something more. So maybe we can explore that some morning, eh?
Great.
All right. Well, thanks, Purna, and have a good day. And
thank you.
yes.
And stay connected with that wider context, both of us.
Yeah. Thank you. Good words. Good words. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.